I realized I might really get in trouble because I hadn't previewed any of this with the teachers. And I said to the students, I hope this doesn't offend any of you. You know, your parents may think Donald Trump is really a cool guy. But whatever, I can tell you that he is a fascist. And one thing I would really encourage you to do is begin to get your tentacles up and be recognizing these things early on. I mean, again, this was 2 years before, more than 2 years before he was elected again. So I said, I only have one question for you. What do you know about your family's situations during the war? 40, 16, 17-year-olds, usually not, right before lunch, usually not so quiet. That room, you could hear a pin drop. And so one girl, pink hair, jumps up, waving her hands. My grandfather was a socialist, and he told us all these stories. And the more that, you know, she filled with this completely understandable pride, her classmates were folding over, looking at the floor, waiting for the floor to open up. And I just kept quiet. I didn't ask again. I knew that something would come. And finally, after a very long silence, a young, maybe 16-year-old boy says very quietly, "We don't know anything." And I bent down and I looked at him and I said, well, then we're the same. Now everybody was sitting straight up, you know, eyes wide. What do you mean? And I'm telling you, that moment was just, if you could feel an inflection point in your body and in your life, it was that moment. Anna's email to me was another moment like that. And I thought, the way that this response tells me that they believed that anybody who survived the Holocaust would just talk trash about Germans in Germany every day of their lives. And why was I here? Here I was, coming, friendly, warm. They couldn't understand it. And the next thing that I realized I said to them was, you know, I was invited here as the descendant to be here to talk to you about my family, but actually it's very clear to me that everyone in this room, I said, and actually everyone everywhere, is a descendant of something. Terrible things, wonderful things, but most of us don't know anything about it. And that was my experience as well. And what Anna gave me was an opportunity to be able to know, you know, more about my family story. And I said, and I really wish that for you as well, because as painful as knowing some of these things is, I feel so much lighter knowing what I know. And I want you to have that opportunity and that experience as well. And it was just this moment for all of us together to be able to take that in. I said, you know, we all live with these things that we didn't even live through ourselves. And you can't work with something that you can't get a hold of. I said it's like, you know what it's like when you wake up in the middle of the night and you're just kind of in this cold sweat and nothing bad happened that day. You have no idea what it's about, and yet you're feeling so heavy. And again, the kids with the big eyes, like, how do you know what happens to us in the middle of the night? And I said, this is a human thing. We all have this experience. But I can now connect this feeling sometimes with this experience, that it's something that I live with, that I didn't live through. And knowing what it is that I'm carrying makes that so much easier to bear. And now I'm here. And so it was just this beautiful exchange, and that's the moment for sure when I still had no idea what it would be. I had no name for anything. I know that those seeds started getting watered in that moment. So fast forward, I go home in November, and what I left Germany with was the thing that stuck with me was this word erasure, and this feeling of erasure in my throat. And it was clear some of it was unintentional, some of it was definitely intentional. Did it matter? I mean, I couldn't make that distinction with certainty in any case. And I had other things that happened on this trip. And then I went to Portugal, and I spent time with a descendant of someone who was saved by the Portuguese Consul General, Aristide de Sougemens. So my entire trip turned out to be all about the Shoah. And late November, the words came into my head, the Unerasure Project. And I went to dinner with a friend, and she said, "How are you doing, since your trip?" I said, "Something has started growing in me. I have no idea what it is. But just so we can talk about it, I'll call it the Unerasure Project." And she banged her hand on the table. She said, "Well, you don't need to think about that anymore." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Whatever you do, you should call it that." And so literally that's how it was born. I still didn't know. I knew it had to do with young people. I knew it had to do with education. And I did contact a friend who I met at the Stolpersteine Verlegung, which I haven't even talked about, for the family, which was an extraordinary experience. And he told me later, I said to him, "What's the word in German for unerasure?" Which, it's not even a word in English, right? It's just like, well, what's the opposite? What could I say that would be clear what's the opposite of erasure? And I couldn't think of anything other than unerasure. And he came back to me 2 weeks later. He said, "Well, I've talked to 52 people." Market researcher, and all of them say you shouldn't translate it. You should leave it. People will get it. You'll have to maybe explain it, but... And so then I decided to have it be the Unerasure Project, because it felt very clear to me that this needed to start in Germany. Even though my home is in the United States, and our nonprofit is based, our not-for-profit is based in the United States. It felt important to me to at least give an acknowledgement to Germany and where this all started. And so it continues to become clearer to me over time that we design and deliver experiential learning programs that are meant to really promote healing in workshops in schools, working with cultural institutions, with government agencies, and in the business world, because there is a lot of continuing connection between descendants, and that as the survivors are less and less available and able to speak to their firsthand experience, or are unwilling, like my mother, to speak to her firsthand experience, is very important for those of us who are willing and able to continue to share that, because we live with it. This is very, very central to our work, is that we all live with these histories, whether we experienced them directly or not. And it's seems very clear to me that the world right now, it's so obvious what it looks like when you don't do that healing. And we cannot afford to be complacent and say, well, that was so long ago, or, well, you know, I didn't have that experience. It's not mine to talk about, or my family didn't talk about it, so I'm going to honor their decision and their choice. I mean, that is, everybody has a choice. And that is something that I emphasize in all of my workshops, that you always have a choice, but understand choosing not to act is also a choice. Choosing to be silent, choosing to be not curious, choosing to take democracy for granted. All of those things are choices. And while you have, in my view, zero responsibility for what happened during the Reich, zero, you have 100% responsibility for how you choose to live in the world now and the world that you choose to create. And there's no prescription on my part for what that should look like. But at least I want to open up the opportunity for them to reflect, which is why we do experiential programs rather than didactic programs. I'm not a Holocaust educator. I have no interest in giving them facts or asking them to tell me back what they heard. But what I do is I tell a short family story to give them an opportunity then with questions in a small group where they get to speak for a couple of minutes with no crosstalk, reflecting on whatever that question or whatever this sparked for them. And this works remarkably well with people who are here who have no German background, you know, who are immigrants to this country themselves, or migrants, people with migrant backgrounds, but who come from places and have families where there was suffering. So I'm quick to tell people, look, in all of our histories, I believe, our ancestry, there are victims, there are survivors, there are bystanders, there are perpetrators. And if we were able to really go back through our entire lineages, we would find some of all of that. And we carry that. And so the question is, how much do you want to shine a light into that darkness, maybe for your own good or your own family, but maybe it's you're curious about your community. Maybe you're curious about how the world could be a better place than it is now, a safer place, a more respectful place, where people are not othered, whether it's Jews or Muslims or gay people or disabled people or thousands of different fat people, thin people, blonde people, dark-haired people, dark-skinned people. To me, it's all crazy. And if my taking the time, spending now half my life in Germany, is a way to really begin that conversation among young people who are, of course, always the future, then that to me seems like the best legacy that I can leave, and something very important that got started with Anna's email.
Do you have any advice that you would like to give to young people who are just beginning to look into their family's history?
It's such a tough thing. I've had many, many questions and conversations with young people, often on the sidelines of these workshops. It's such a sensitive topic in the family, and I know what that's like. I say, look, I'm not suggesting that you go home and push and create trouble. But maybe you can find a way to do it from the side. In my class, I'm wondering about this, and I heard about that, and so there are a lot of kids who come from mixed marriages where another parent might be from, let's see, recently Vietnam, Sudan, various places around the world. And honestly, it's much, much harder in other countries that don't have the record-keeping bent that Germans have been known for. We do have a tragic, and it's incomplete, but a much more complete picture of what happened during the Reich than we would otherwise. The Nazi-Zeit is quite clear through documentation. The research is not easy. I'm at the point now where it's gotten very difficult. For example, I had a number of great-grand aunts that I've only recently learned about who married Polish husbands. Don't even always know the last name. No marriage certificates. So then I don't know their children's last name. I don't know who they married. I can't find any descendants. It's just, unless we can do it through DNA, there's really no way to be able to track. So for many of these people from countries that have been besieged by war, many of them in contemporary times, that documentation doesn't exist. And so, but what I would say is tread a little carefully. And not just for the family, but also for yourselves, because this is the definition of paradox. The living definition of paradox is my experience of finding out terrible, terrible, terrible things, and somehow with each puzzle piece feeling lighter. With each Stolperstein that I lay, feeling happy, despite the terrible stories behind some of them. It's quite a remarkable thing to be able to give someone who was in my family also hidden. So it's just in recent times that I've learned. One thing my mother told me that was absolutely not true was that no one in our family died in the camps. And then I think she amended it at some point saying, well, nobody close. And because I couldn't have a conversation with her about it, and she's long since gone, I can't know precisely other than what I said earlier, which is some people just close the door and that's it. There's just no going back. There's no door there anymore for them. I had my great-grandfather, it turns out, I knew of one sibling, and that brother had escaped with his family in 1935 to then Palestina. But my grandfather had 8 brothers and sisters. One of them died as a baby, and the other 6 were, almost all of them were murdered, and their children and grandchildren. So to all of a sudden learn about this huge family that I had, and had the Nazis wipe them off the face of the earth, and have my family also just, erase them. It was very, very painful. My first reaction was fury. And my sister was like, Mom may not have even known. I said, look, it's not about blaming. They had the right to make their own choice. And I would always say that. They did not have any idea what the consequences of that choice would be for them or for us. But I did not expect them to sacrifice themselves, for my benefit. But so, of course, the second reaction after the anger was just a flood of, what must it have been like for them? These were all of my grandfather's aunts, uncles, and cousins. And I grew up with my grandfather. He lived until 1971 or 1972. So he knew. I have been to the archives in Duisburg since then, and I've seen correspondence with another family cousin who survived. So, of course, he knew. But, I just wish they were here. I wish we could have this conversation now. So what I would say to the young people is pace yourselves. Have your support group around you. Your family may or may not welcome this. And it may not be right in your family. Look into your community. Maybe someone lived in your building. Maybe they lived on your block. Maybe they went to the university that you're going to. There's so many ways that you can connect with this history. And there's new discoveries every single day. I mean, every day I hear about new things, not just about my family, but about people from Köln. A volunteer in our Verein is just discovered someone who was a fashion designer, a Jewish woman fashion designer, very likely queer, had 40 employees in her factory in Köln, and was saved by her girlfriend, her lover, as far as we can tell. And she went to NS doc. They knew nothing about this woman. She went to the mikvah. They knew nothing about this woman. And now, with our support and encouragement, she will be participating in an event in 2026. And there will be a Stolperstein laid. Children of descendants of the lover will be coming. There's reams of documentation of her artistry given to a university in Texas. This is so exciting for me because, I may not have a family connection with her, but this is beneficial for all of us to have these lives and these names and these stories brought to the present day. I believe this helps answer the perennial question, which is now a big thing in Germany. Why do we have to deal with this ancient history? Why do we have to carry this? And my response is, well, first of all, I'm not asking you to, I don't make you guilty for this. Whether your family members were SS officers or unfortunate bystanders or not from Germany at all, you bear no responsibility for what they did, but you bear all the responsibility for what you choose now. And that is up to you. And that is very much in the present. That has nothing to do with ancient history. So all of our work is trying to help build a bridge between these hidden stories. What does that mean to us in the present? That's my question. That's why my life has changed. Since after this first trip, I came back a year later, having started a not-for-profit in the United States, and I arrived in Germany for a 4-month stay on 6 October 2023. And friends had asked me, well, how are you going to talk about Israel when you're in Germany, I said, why would I talk about Israel in Germany? It's like completely, my life doesn't intersect. I don't have a history. I didn't live on a kibbutz. I have never even visited. And they said, well, you know, in Germany, Israel is kind of a big deal because it's so much the way that the German government has chosen to show a lot of the way the German government does its penance is supporting of Israel financially and otherwise. Yeah, so by October 8th, I had to start talking about Israel and making a distinction between Israeli politics and being Jewish, completely separate topics. And so I got asked this question 2 weeks ago in a workshop with adult Abitur students, probably half of whom are from a migration background. And one of the questions they asked me, of course, was about, you know, what did I think about Israel and Gaza and all of that? And I said, you know, honestly, for me, it's pretty simple. There's only one side to stand on. And they're all waiting for my answer. I said, the side of humanity. Nobody's babies should be murdered. I don't care the religion, the nationality, the kind of scarf you wear, the language you speak. Nobody should be being killed, right? There should be personally, not speaking for all Jewish people, I support a two-state solution. Everyone should feel safe in their home. But, you know, it's personal. That's not, I can't speak for anyone else. But I said, your histories also count. And you've been through a lot. And I know in Germany that there's a high priority on integration and taking on the Shoah, the Holocaust, as part of your own identity is a very important part of becoming German. And I said to them, and I'm speaking to a lot of teachers and politicians about this as well, I believe it's very unreasonable to ask people who have come through their own tremendous suffering, who may have grown up in places where they were taught to hate Jews because of the conflation, mistaken conflation between Jewishness and Israeli politics. Someone needs to be interested in their stories, in their suffering, and help them then begin to, in their own experience, build a bridge between this and the persecution that happened during the NS-Zeit. And the feedback that I've gotten, the evaluations from a lot of these students is, wow, you know, like, thank you so much. We haven't heard that, or we haven't heard that much. So this descendancy, like back to that time with those kids in that first classroom, we're all descendants. And we all carry the weight of things we don't know much about often, or that we're not allowed to talk about, or we're afraid to talk about. And I think a lot of what we intend to do with the Unerasure Project is give people an opportunity to be curious about that. Again, I'm not trying to give answers or make false equivalencies. It's not about saying, somebody asked me, oh, well, do you think what happened, what Israel did in Gaza is the same as the Holocaust? Honestly, it's not a question that I chose to answer. I don't think that's the right question, but I need a much longer time than I have in 3 minutes to give a response, a good response to that question. So we are trying to create opportunities for young people to engage and find a way to engage that's meaningful for them. I can give them a ton of suggestions, but I have no idea what it is, whether it's through the arts, the kind of essay that Anna wrote and research she did, that's not going to be possible or of interest for every kid. But poetry, music, theater, painting, sculpture, there are kids already all throughout Germany and the world who are doing these kinds of projects, even very young, in the schools in the lower grades. And I think it's something that I really want to support, is for people to find a mechanism or a path of expression that really, really feels resonant for them. I have a friend from Berkeley who is third generation, and he's a hip hop artist, and he has been coming for 25 years to Hamburg and Eastern Europe, doing creative writing workshops where the young people end up writing their own hip hop and rap songs and then performing. They have more than 90 minutes, they have a few weeks together. I think this is great and very, very important. And I'm working with a number of theater artists now to continue to bring some of these stories, whether they're the students' own stories or whether they're stories we can help them, not of all the well-known people. I mean, it's great to do stuff with Anne Frank's diary, but I'm really encouraged about having people find and share more stories about people who've been lost to history. And every life deserves that kind of respect and honoring. So we have plans for the Unerasure podcast with young people cross-border, inherently cross-border, so that they get to explore erasure and unerasure in their own communities and then share those experiences with, students or young people in France and Germany and the United States and Portugal, Brazil, Chile, because I think for them to look at the present day, their own environment, and be questioning, what is it that we don't know? And why has that been hidden? And what is it? It's not about finding blame. It's not about pointing the finger. It's about, now we're living in what I call the post-fact world. It's quite interesting to be, what does it mean to be looking at things as they are, looking at the truth with a light shining on it in a world where there's constant destruction and support for that, even among young people in the voting booth. So that's why I keep coming back and doing this work after, it's the 18th of December, 4 days ago. 15 Jewish people were murdered on Bondi Beach in Australia for no other reason than being Jewish. And there would have been a lot more people who had died if it had not been for a Muslim man who came and wrested a rifle away from one of the gunmen. We are really all in this together. Yeah, and the question is, how do we identify ourselves? He identified himself as a world citizen, as a human who really cared about people's lives. And that, in that moment, was the most important identity that he could assume. So if anything that we're trying to do with the Unerasure project is really to help people find that identity that baseline identity that is not their gender, their religion, their sexual orientation, their size, their country of origin, their anything, what they prefer to eat for dinner or what they're allergic to identify really as a human being who wants to live in a world of dignity and respect for humans and the environment. I mean, we could keep going on, but you know, that's really where it comes down to me. And I think that descendants of people who were persecuted and murdered, and descendants of people who have grandparents and great-grandparents who were perpetrators, and descendants of people who saved others. All of us have something that we can bring to our present moment that makes a contribution to the world that we have all the evidence of what it looks like when we don't take care. So let's take on the opportunity to create a world where we do care and where one person can really make a huge, huge, huge difference without any. I've asked grade 5 students. I don't do a typical workshop with them. They don't speak much English. It has to be translated. You know, they haven't studied the Shoah yet. I'm not going to introduce them. Thank you very much. But I ask them, what could you do? They tell me what kind of world they want to create. I say, what could you do that doesn't require anybody's permission? Not from your teacher, your parents, your priest or pastor, the government. I said, I'm not asking you to be defiant. I'm asking you to just think about what you could do to create more of the world that you've just told me that you want to live in. They raise their hands immediately. Well, when I see somebody eating alone, I could go eat with them for lunch. When my friend whose family moved here from Syria is feeling sad, then I could go and maybe we could just spend some time together, try to do something fun. I mean, they just had a ton of ideas when they were given the thought experiment. What could you do? Where's your power to choose for yourself? Not defiance, just clarity. Even at grade 5, they know exactly what they can do, how to be good people. And wow, that makes me want to get up every morning and keep doing more of the same.
Thank you, Terry.